Hello everyone, welcome back to the Christ MotoGP podcast, and it was perfection for Pecco in Assen, who literally just led every single lap of every single session, it seemed like. But yeah, joining me of course this week is Pete McLaren and Rob Jones. We have a lot to cover, gents. There was plenty on and off the track, but we'll just start with the world champion, Pete. He is in the best form that I can remember him ever being in. You know, said to the stat, he's back-to-back weekends now. He's led every single lap of both races, sprint and Grand Prix, and it could have been like that in Catalonia if he didn't crash out of the sprint. Just incredible, isn't it, really, for what he is doing on that GP24?
It is, isn't it? As you say, he's Pecco back to his best, and it's when he's at his most dangerous, isn't it? Because what do you do to stop him? I think he almost knows that it's down to him when he's in this kind of run of form. As long as he does everything right, doesn't make a big mistake, as you say, as in Catalonia, pace-wise, there's no one that can live with him. And I suppose credit to Jorge Martin, he tried his best and he put a bit of pressure on him at least. But really, that's all he could do, wasn't it? It was just try and cling in there with Pecco. But I think you always had the feeling that Martin was riding harder or more on the limit than Pecco was. Pecco seemed to have it all under control, didn't he? And as you say, now it's he's eating into the title gap as well. We could see who's going to go into the summer break leading the World Championship this weekend's German round. It'll be another showdown, I think, between those two, won't it? But certainly for Assen, another Pecco perfect weekend.
Yeah, he has the place tattooed on his arm, and I keep hearing it over the weekend, Rob. But like, he really does love the place. It just shows that it's 3 Grand Prix wins in a row at Assen, 3 Grand Prix wins in a row currently that the run he's on. He just looks unstoppable. I mean, it took 30.4 seconds quicker than last year's race time. Yeah, weather comes into that. It was hotter last year, but it just shows, doesn't it? When he's in that groove and he knows that he just has the pace, he just can't be stopped, can he?
No, and I mean, it went back to Friday even to top every session except the warm-up and to lead every lap of both races. You could just see how confident and comfortable he was at Assen. Obviously, he's got a great record at Mugello, and you would expect that, being Ducati's home race, his home race. But it's almost he's taken it a step up even further in Assen. And the performance this weekend was, for me, there were big worrying signs for the rest of the competition, and Martin in particular, because like Pete said, he was there and the only rider sort of able to challenge. But Bagnaia had him covered every time that Martin stepped up his pace. It was a faster lap of the race from Bagnaia, and considerably faster, and just sort of almost putting Martin back in his place and saying, you've got no chance of winning today. The performance all weekend was obviously of a 2-time world champion, but of someone who I think knows if he doesn't make any mistakes or nothing, unexpected happens, I think he truly believes that he's going to win this world championship again.
Yeah, it comes across like that, doesn't it, Pete? He's got the gap down to 10 points now, and I don't know, we said it in the last podcast, you're almost just bagging on him making a mistake, because if he doesn't, and he's doing this, he doesn't really touch the bike over the weekend, he's happy with his setup, and like Rob said, first time in his MotoGP career that he's actually topped FP1, which is like a mad stat. He couldn't believe it himself when he got told. It's worrying for everyone else, isn't it, including especially Martin
and all the other manufacturers, as you say, literally everyone else. It's almost like, and I think the guys who explained this after the race, that Ducati had their issues with adapting to this new rear tyre, or the revised rear tyre. They had them early on, didn't they, in the pre-season, and they seem to have got on top of it quicker than the others. And as soon as they've done that, I think Pecco's pointed to Jerez, hasn't he? And
yep.
Setup changes that they made there. Really, since then, he's never looked back. And yet the other manufacturers, they're still having some issues, aren't they? And those early rounds, it looked perhaps a bit unnaturally close, didn't it, between the manufacturers? And we were seeing the Aprilia obviously up there. We're seeing the KTM with the Costa as well. And yet, the last couple of rounds, really, it's just been certainly the top 2 guys on the Ducati and Marc, on the GP23, sort of in that battle with Bastianini, last place on the podium, that kind of thing. But then the others, they're really in almost a different race, I think you could say, couldn't you? It's down to Pecco almost, it feels like, to make a mistake. But let's see this weekend, completely different track, Sachsenring. So that'll be the key, won't it? If Pecco can keep this run going, or Martin can strike back. And as you say, I think it will come down to a mistake. Who will make the mistake first? The pressure's building, the lead is getting smaller. Someone eventually, with all of these races, there will be another DNF in one of them, and it'll be who blinks first, I think.
Yeah, it's a good point you make about the tyre situation earlier on in the season, Pete. Because maybe the GP23 and the GP24, they kind of looked, there wasn't really a difference, but over the past few rounds, we've kind of seen the GP24 just kind of accelerate even more away from not even the other manufacturers, its own brand of the 23. And that's my question to you, Rob. You can notice that even you said before we started recording, when you just see the onboard, you see the way the GP24 shoots out of a corner in acceleration. It's a real asset to have, especially for the top two. Even Bastianini as well, who came third yesterday, he looked stronger as the race got on, but as the GP23s struggled.
Yeah, I think we've seen it sort of slowly developing throughout the season. Obviously, at the beginning, Marc Marquez was there in the battle, but that I think was more a case of he wasn't able to make that extra step because he was learning the bike. And then when he sort of got on level terms, there was a couple races, Jerez, Le Mans, where he sort of had the same pace, and the GP24 hadn't really just made that further step over the GP23. But now it's evident. I think Mugello and Catalonia were a sign, and then especially here in Assen, obviously you've got the fast flowing sections where that doesn't really come into it. But for me, it was really noticeable coming out of turn 5. The really sort of stop and go left-hander, and then that acceleration onto the back straight. The punch that Martin and Bagnaia were getting out of that corner, and even late in the race, Bastianini, I know obviously he conserves his tyre better than anyone, but that punch out of the corner, you're gaining several bike lengths every lap, and then it's a case of, we know how good someone like Marc Marquez is on the brakes, but having to try and get that back, and the time you're losing in the corners on a circuit where Assen doesn't really suit someone like a Marc Marquez in terms of it's a bit more fast and flowing. You're already losing that battle, and then when you've got someone like Bagnaia who's riding probably the best he's ever ridden at this point. Pete said it about making a mistake, and Bagnaia so many times this season, and I think now we're only just really taking note. He said in press conferences, we know very well the potential of the bike. If we get it right every weekend, we know we can win. And we obviously know that he can win pretty much anywhere. But now it feels like it's a given, or it's going to take something other than him being on his best form for someone else to win, So I think the GP24 has made those steps now. And the fact that they've made them so early in the season, we're not even at the mid-season point.
Yeah.
I think we really do have to look at Bagnaia and Martin being, I don't want to say the only two that can win most of the races, but it's looking like that at least.
Yeah, it definitely does. This is because they don't make mistakes in terms of their qualifying. They're always on there. Well, Jorge Martin did get a penalty for riding slowly on the line. Maybe that you could class that as a mistake, but he still came from 5th in the Grand Prix, and he was 2nd straight away. It's like it doesn't really faze them. They're always there, and that's the thing that I noticed by Pecco, Pete. The stats are incredible. Like a 23rd MotoGP win, 23rd win with Ducati, which equals Casey Stoner's tally. I know Casey Stoner done it in maybe a faster time, but yeah, and even the other one, he's the first person in the Grand Prix, well, the Premier class, to win 3 races in a row at Assen since Mick Doohan in the 90s. Like things like that. Like he's truly a special talent, isn't he? When he kind of humbles himself. He doesn't really want to look at it. He said yesterday he'll look at it after his career finishes, but he's doing special things, isn't he?
Definitely, as you say, to be up there breaking records or being compared with the all-time greats of the sport is, you don't do that easily, do you? And he's still a pretty young guy, so he's got plenty of good career left. I mean, this would be, if he wins it, 3rd title in a row. I mean, that's also it's a big thing to do. And Pecco likes to do his talking on the track, doesn't he? So we know that's maybe why he doesn't jump up and shout about his achievements, but they're there on paper. There's no doubt about what he's doing and how strong he is as a rider. And up against guys the quality of, as we say, Marc Marquez and people like that. I think just to add one thing, you guys talking about the 24 and the 23, the interesting points there. I think for me the bottom line is also, we look how hard Marc pushed to get a factory bike, and that tells you that he understands the difference. He understands that he needs that latest bike, doesn't he? If he thought, it's a 10th here, a 10th there, he wouldn't have pushed so hard, would he? But the fact that he was absolutely laying it on the line, look, this is what I want, I've got to have the factory bike next year, because he does understand, even after half a dozen races, let's say, that there is a difference in performance. And as you say, it's visible at times on the racetrack, isn't it? Let's see what upgrades the 23s get. There's aero packages to come and all that kind of thing, isn't there? So let's see. But let's be honest, Marc, he's still chasing that one win. Of course, we've got a big race for him coming up this weekend. But there's a lot of people that would have said, you know what, Marc would have won by now on a Ducati. And again, this comes back to your point about Pecco. And the reason he hasn't won yet is because of the quality of Pecco at the front there. So, you don't beat Marc Marquez easily, whatever bike you're on, in the last lap battle. So, just to come back to what you're saying, Pecco definitely proving his worth.
Definitely, yeah. We're just going to go straight into Marc Marquez now, because the big talking point from the race yesterday, Rob, was his weekend really leading up to it. It just looks really scrappy. I'd say it's probably maybe the second worst weekend, maybe the worst weekend he's had on the Ducati in terms of just looking a bit out of sorts. Saturday especially, the qualifying was messy. He had that bit of a tussle with Elisa Spargaro, and they all got a bit messy there. He crashed out at turn 7, which was very lucky for him. He didn't actually do damage to himself, because it was a fast corner and a lot of people hurt themselves at the weekend there. But the sprint, he made an error from himself. He said he was just offline. He was clipping the inside curb, and there's a bump on the inside curb, and the second lap he just lost concentration when trying to look for the line with Vinales. He's got a bit distracted, and down he went. And then in the Grand Prix yesterday, a 4th place it looked like, which would have been a good salvage job for him, but then tyre pressures come into it, and we kind of got wind that maybe this was happening during the race. When you seen on board, he let Dijan Antonio through so he could cool his tyre down, and then it comes out after he gets a 16-second penalty, ends up in 10th place for being 0.01 bar under for one lap. The finest of margins, which is just, What do you think about that? It's a tough one for him and Gresini, isn't it?
Tough one to take. I mean, like you said, going back to the start of the weekend, it was almost like a contrast of what we'd seen earlier in the season, where he maybe struggled on the Friday and then bounced back on the Saturday in qualifying or the sprint, and then finished off the weekend really strongly in the Grand Prix. He seemed to have really good race pace on Friday and seemed to be quite comfortable at times. Then obviously there was that moment in qualifying where he and a few other riders were slow riding. It was almost shades of Moto3 from a few years ago, and it was getting a bit silly at one point. And then obviously, Marc tried to do too much on that hot lap, tried to make up too much ground. That sort of move at turn 7 on Aleix, lost the front, and like you said, could have been a worse crash, because we saw, Raul Fernandez was someone who went down at that corner, and it was a big, big crash earlier in the weekend. So Marc was quite fortunate, and especially since it came from some pretty silly antics, you would say. The mistake he made in the sprint, you could see sort of on the replay from the behind the bike, he clipped that curb too much and sort of destabilized him, and then threw the back of the bike out a little bit. So obviously an unforced error, you have to say then, and he owned up to that post race. But a race where Bagnaia was first, Martin was second, so more points lost. And then in the Grand Prix there was he started the race quite well, but then there was that bizarre moment, wasn't there? I think going into turn 9 or turn 10, that left-hand corner, where he sort of pointed at Di Giannantonio with one finger and then sort of ran wide, let Di Gio through. And then you could see he had the pace if he wanted to sort of challenge, but you could tell there was a reason why he was holding back. And then for me, what was obviously, I don't know if they'd be able to tell him really that Bastianini was coming up on them, but Bastianini was catching them past Pedro Acosta, past Vinales. And then I was thinking, if Marquez knows that Bastianini is behind him and wants a podium, he's going to have to make the move now. And he was quite happy to sit there. Bastianini forced his way through. And I think for Marc, it's a case of he may have just settled for that position. If that hadn't have happened, just stayed behind Di Giannantonio, because he knew that problem with the front tyre pressure, that he was sort of behind and needed to make up for it. I think, when you actually think back to it, the move Bastianini put on him, which then gave Marquez more free air on his front tyre, potentially cost him. And was the reason for that penalty and for that lack of front tyre pressure. So not the weekend he would have wanted. A 4th position, like you said, would have been a very good salvage job considering the issue he had to deal with in the race. But then to lose that and be dropped down to 10th will be, he seemed in fairly good spirits after the race, because he knew he wasn't really in contention anyway, but not the way he would have wanted to end this weekend, and not the weekend he would have wanted at all.
Yeah, definitely not, Pete. You know, the finest of margins, really, isn't it? And him and Grassini, allegedly, they've said their argument was that Bastianini running him off track is a real factor in causing this. What do you think about it after what he said? You know, he said, yeah, things happen, but we know why it happened. It's one of them things, isn't it?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, he accepted the decision, but I think he did go to race control with Grassini because they wanted to know, does it get taken into account, the Bastianini incident? You know, I think he said he was a bit surprised that Bastianini didn't get a drop one place penalty for that move. He thought, you know, if there's contact and the rider gets sent off the track, then maybe that should happen. But as far as his tyre pressure, he said they could show on the data that the tyre pressure dropped. And as you guys have said, it was only the smallest of margins that he was actually punished for. So they say that was the difference. I think he lost about a second or so in that sector. So the tyre cools down a bit, you know, the pressure drops, and then you have to get back up to speed. I think over that entire lap, it was about 1.4 seconds or something of his best time. So, yeah, their point was that, and they wanted to know, look, does that get taken into account? Now, it doesn't at the moment, and this is a loophole that's been there for a while. It's been spoken about last year, started this year, ironically by Frankie Carcetti. You know, Mark's crew chief himself said to me at Sepang about it, and the problem is, if someone falls off or if someone runs wide, you know, they come back on, they're going to be below tire pressure, and this is what we saw happen. And there needs to be something, doesn't there, really, in the rules? It could be done quite easily, a bit like with track limits, or a bit like even the 105% qualifying time. So you look and you see if someone is slow through a certain sector, significantly slower, let's say, you disregard that lap from the tyre pressure calculations, because what would have happened if it started splitting with rain and everyone dropped 2-3 seconds a lap?
That's a good point.
So, you know, what would happen then? Everyone's pressure would have dropped low. Now, of course, the other side of it all is that, look, everyone else was legal on Sunday. So, you know, but as Mark said, look, I was managing it. I knew that I was in trouble, as you guys have said. He knew he was borderline on the pressure when he got to the front of the group. He expected to be in a pack, didn't he? But Pecco and Martin had disappeared. So suddenly he's in fresh air at the front. He knows he's in trouble, so he lets Didier by and stays in the pack, and he was handling it. So, but what he couldn't handle and what he couldn't predict was that there would be that moment with Bastianini. He would get nudged off track, and it was that moment that actually meant he didn't make the pressure margins. And what do you do then? You know, when an incident that isn't caused by your rider ends up lowering the tyre pressure. So let's see if something happens with this, but certainly it's something that could come back again later in the year, and as I say, a lot more riders could be affected. So I think it's something that needs to be looked at.
Definitely. And if you want to read the article that Pete's referring to, Frankie Carcetti is a really good one, Pete. I'm going to share the link below. It's quite interesting what he said, because it actually pretty much mimics what happened yesterday, because he does say, what if someone makes, like you said, an incredible comeback ride after being pushed off, and then they just get told there's a 16-second penalty or you're disqualified if it's the second time? You're like, how does this even... it's a really good read, and it almost foreshadows what happens. So yeah, I'll link that below, and who knows what's going to happen next. As Pete said, maybe the rules will get tweaked after the summer break, I don't know. But yeah, Marc Marquez, not his best weekend, but yeah, coming up to this weekend, which we'll get on to in a moment, the Sachsenring. I want to keep on just about the Grand Prix. There was a few incidents yesterday, Pete. Alex Rins, and he had a really massive high side. Just update us on his condition, because it looked like a real nasty one, didn't it?
It did, yeah. It seems like there might be a fracture in his right foot, which we think that's the same leg, the right leg, but of course he broke last year at Mugello. So worrying that it's the same leg again. But it's certainly in doubt for this weekend. I think we can safely say that. Not clear yet whether he'll need surgery on it or what they'll decide to do. But yeah, real nasty high side, wasn't it? I think the Yamaha's been struggling for grip all weekend. Coming back to the whole tyre thing, I think Quattro was saying, look, we're not making that step with this new 2024 revised rear tyre that the Ducatis especially have taken. You know, that they are faster than last year, but their increase in speed is sort of more to do with everything else on the bike. They're still not getting the most out of this tyre and figuring it out yet. And Rins certainly to be launched like that. Okay, he was a bit offline, wasn't he? But yeah, definitely there was that caught him out big time, didn't it? So fingers crossed that he hasn't re-damaged anything from the fractures last year, which were pretty nasty, weren't they?
Yeah, they were terrible last year, and I hope he gets better, because it's just, you want some riders to have, for a year they don't have any luck, and for the past year or so Alex Rins has had no luck at all. So hoping he gets fit soon. I want to talk about Aprilia and KTM, Rob. A real up and down weekend for them. You know, Alicia Spargaro, he didn't end up racing on Sunday after his incident in the last lap of the sprint. KTM's, they struggled too. Acosta had a big crash on the last lap, wasn't it, yesterday, or the 2 laps to go, I think it was, where he crashed at turn 7. They just really couldn't lay anything on the Ducatis, could they? Even Maverick Vinales was the shining light, really, but then he had a position drop on the last lap because he touched the green at the Gert Timmer chicane. Yeah, they have a lot of catching up to do, don't they?
They do. Like you said, Vinales was probably the quickest out of all of them, and did have good pace. Again, it was very much a case of he had strong pace when he was sort of on his own, particularly in qualifying. He was able at times to match Bagnaia even, the odd lap here and there. Once he was in the battle yesterday, you could see where the Ducati again was strong, and he just couldn't make the overtakes where he was stronger, because wherever he was stronger, there was that part of the track coming into the final chicane, that really fast right before turns 14 and 15. He was really strong there. He would catch up to Marc every lap. And then the sweeping left, he was losing so much time, and that's obviously where he made the mistake on the last lap. And he said he was really struggling with the change of direction in that corner, which is typically the strength of the Aprilia. So, it's funny that this circuit, their strengths were sort of taken away a little bit. Like you said, for Aleix, a very up and down weekend. Fast at times, but 2 monster crashes. And obviously he was pretty badly not injured, but, he was suffering a bit after the first one, and then the second one was enough to rule him out. And obviously Savadori also suffered some back fractures with his crash on Saturday. So bit of a nightmare for the factory Aprilia team. Obviously, Vinales managed to get some good points haul for the team, which was something at least. Regarding KTM, good to see Miller was a little bit stronger, and there's talk about him potentially going to Gresini, so he's maybe starting to perform a little bit better, with his future sort of in doubt. Binder was there, in that sort of second group, but he wasn't able to make much of an impact, sort of hanging on a little bit, like Acosta was at the end of the race before his crash yesterday. Acosta was, for what was probably his toughest weekend so far this season, bounced back quite well in the Grand Prix before his crash. He was looking strong. I know his pace dipped a little bit at the end, but he was holding on the best he could. Obviously, another monster crash at turn 7, which was... It's not that you don't really want to crash anywhere on a MotoGP circuit, but turn 7 at Assen's not the best. Yeah. So a decent sort of response from Acosta, but obviously the crash was unfortunate. To your point, they've got catching up to do at times to the GP23. So catching the GP24 at this point, it's just when Bagnaia and Martin are riding at such a high level, it's just proving nearly impossible, because Vinales was quick and sort of closer to the coat of Vinales this weekend, and you couldn't lay a glove on them. So a lot of work to be done.
A lot of work to be done indeed. It's just, they look strong in just certain parts, but even after the sprint, you could tell with Maverick, he just wasn't happy at all. He was third, but he kind of had that feeling that if this is what it's like in the sprint, what's it going to be like tomorrow? And they just disappeared from him. And then he had to deal, of course, with Gian Antonio, Marquez. Yeah, good point, Rob, that even the Master GP 23s is tough for the likes of Aprilia at certain tracks. So yeah, a big task for them going into Sachsenring, and I think KTM should be better at the Sachsenring. I think Aprilia, it's that sort of nature of track, isn't it, where it's smaller, the times are a bit closer. But yeah, I think we're going to see kind of more of the same. I don't really want to say out to our listeners, but it's probably going to be more of the same for the Ducatis at the front. But off track, Pete, big news. We have a few rider market and manufacturer changes, so we do. So just to confirm, we recorded last, Bezzecchi to Aprilia was confirmed, and that was we kind of covered that. It was expected. But then the big one happened. Not Alex Marquez staying with Gresini. That's already happened too. The big one, Pramac to Yamaha. That is a massive statement from Yamaha, isn't it? To get the leading, the team champion to go from Ducati to their bike for 2025. It's a 7-year deal, 2 years with the current regulations that we have, and then 5 in the 850cc era. Big statement from Yamaha, and a lot of them were happy from their comments, especially Fabio Quartararo, that they got this over the line.
Yeah, exactly, and I think credit to Lynn Jarvis here. This is his last year as the head of the team, and his two goals that coming into it must have been new deal for Quartararo and find a satellite team, and he's ticked both of them off, hasn't he? And the second one, as you say, that this satellite team deal, it was looking a bit rocky, wasn't it, at times? And we obviously, the rumor at first was VR46 because of the obvious link with Rossi's team. Then when they made clear about Ducati, Pramac started to come into the mix really around Portimao. I think was the first time I heard it, but it still was far from certain. And there was even talk of, well, sort of a plan B of boosting the test team, wasn't there? That if they couldn't get another satellite team. But it seems like, again, Mugello proved to be sort of pivotal in so many ways. And so, with the rider decision at Ducati, it seems that also it sent Pramac sort of into the arms of Yamaha. And because let's face it, if you're Pramac, what's your purpose? Your purpose is you can't expect to be fighting for the title as a satellite team every year, as they're doing with Jorge Martin at the moment, can you? You can't expect to be winning the team's title as they did last year every year as a satellite team. So, you need to be developing young riders and things like that. But they're losing Martin. And then at the same time, Ducati the last two new signings to the factory team have come from Gresini, not from Pramac anyway, haven't they?
Yeah.
You've had Bastianini and now Marc Marquez. So you can understand why Pramac are kind of like, well, what's our, where do we fit in here? And especially with no obvious replacement for Martin for next year, with Marquez turning it down and everything else. So it makes sense, I guess, that they would make this fresh start with Yamaha and full factory bikes. So as you say, long-term deal. Sounds like there'll be some sort of collaboration in Moto2 as well. Things like that. So big news for them. Big news for the championship. Evens things up a bit. Ducati down to 6 bikes, of course. They'll still have more than anyone else, but at least all the other manufacturers will now have 4. So big move for Yamaha. And as you say, welcomed by all of their riders, both Quartararo and Rins. I mean, Rins does not officially have a contract for next year yet, but that seems like a formality, doesn't it, at the moment? So all of them have welcomed this because they know just how important it is to have more bikes on track.
Yeah, you got that sense, didn't you, Rob, from the riders especially, that they were happy about it. I mean, Alex Rins was in brilliant form on Thursday. He was like leaking all sorts, wasn't he? Like, I think he didn't read the Yamaha memo. He got told that they had 2 new engines, but Quartararo said they didn't have a new engine, and I think it slipped that they did have the new engine, and then he kind of said, well, there's going to be 2 new bikes somewhere soon, and I'm like, well, that's obviously going to be a Pramac. So Alex Rins was happy about it. Quartararo kind of said, he was pressing a lot for months with Yamaha to get this over the line. It's going to make a big difference, isn't it? Because they only have the 2 bikes and they're only looking at each other's data, but now they can look at next season, a whole spread. They can see this is what our bikes do. And as Pete said, it seems like it's going to be kind of a partnership like KTM are doing. They're going to have essentially 4 full factory bikes that are going to be just trying to go for the same direction. It's a good move, isn't it, for Yamaha?
Yeah, it is. Just to your point about Rins, it was almost like he was doing his best job to send forward an application to join us here at Crash or something. He was breaking news left, right and centre. But brilliant move for Yamaha. We know how much, in particular, Quartararo has spoken about this. Last year he was sort of beating the drum, saying that Yamaha needed the extra 2 bikes. And this year, it's pretty much been every weekend saying that we need more data, we need more bikes, we need more top-level riders. And, you both made the point to sign a deal with Pramac, the team champions from last year, a team that's again competing and could very well win the riders title this year with Martin. It's a team that has a knack for success and has proven their worth in MotoGP. So that Pramac aren't going to go to Yamaha to just fill a spot. They're going to want some success as well. So they must believe, like Quartararo did when he re-signed, they must believe in the project that Yamaha are selling in a way. So I think for Pramac, it's a huge deal. We've already heard the sort of names being leaked that they could be after. Di Giannantonio is one, and that's something that could be a move. Miguel Oliveira's name has sort of popped up a little bit, and then there's, with the collaboration in Moto2, is there room for a young rider to come up from Moto2? That's also possible. So I think for Pramac and for Yamaha to get that deal over the line when, at times it was very much sort of like tug of war. Pramac had made some statements, I think, in Mugello saying they could be staying with Ducati.
Yeah.
But there was no real sort of truth to that, or it wasn't really backed up by Ducati. So to get that over the line, like Pete said, from Lynn Jarvis, who's, leaving the team at the end of this and leaving the project at the end of this year, a big statement from Jarvis, a big statement from Yamaha. And I think it's going to this is what they need, and I think this is what we need in terms of for the sport to see Yamaha come back into having a better chance of being at the front. We want more teams and more riders at the front, especially when you're Yamaha and you've got a rider of Quartararo's level.
Yeah.
Quartararo shouldn't be riding around in 15th position. He's the 2021 world champion on merit, and I think this will only help them going forward.
It will. And what I will say, the last point I have, it's that when you look at the Japanese manufacturers, Yamaha are definitely being a lot more proactive than it seems in Honda at the minute, and I think that's what kind of gives you not the sense that they're going to get back to the front straight away, but you can kind of understand they've got all these engineers that they've signed. Max Bartolini was a massive signing for Yamaha, and Quartararo, Pete, he mentioned that to you as well about how big it was for him, to have that conversation where that he drove to his house and he spoke to him and stuff, and had that real understanding of this guy really knows what he wants to do with this project. And I think it's really good for Yamaha. I'm really happy to see Pramac also take the risk as well, because who knows, in 2 years time, whenever the regulations change, Yamaha might have an absolute a weapon. They could be right at the front. And yeah, MotoGP needed it, definitely. I think it seems a lot more rounded now for the manufacturers, and that's the key thing here. We're going to get more bikes from more manufacturers, and I think, yeah, good that this has happened, and I'm glad it's happened now and it's announced, because now we can focus on who they're going to sign, which is the fun part. And yeah, who knows, they grab someone from Moto 2, they could sign, like you say, Rob, a Gian Antonio, which would be a really good fit, I think. Yeah, good stuff. Really happy with that move, and I think it's just really good for MotoGP to have it. So that's really everything. I'm just checking my notes from the Assen. There's plenty that we've covered there. Now I want to move on to Sachsenring. Now, Sachsenring, it's maybe the most quirkiest track that MotoGP have. It's like a go-kart track. It's small, it's tight, it's Marc Marquez's home. It's the track he loves. 11 race wins, 8 in MotoGP, but last year was the start of everything that went wrong, really, with Honda. It was the beginning of the end, where he had the 5 crashes, and he has this added pressure. Maybe I could say it's pressure. People are expecting him to win this, but the GP24s, especially Bagnaia and Martin, who battled for the victories last year there, this isn't going to be easy, is it, for Marc Marquez this weekend?
Definitely not. No, there were times during the Honda years, weren't there, where you could always give Marc the trophy on Friday or even Thursday, actually, before even going to practice. Definitely not going to be like that this time around, is it? I think he'll definitely be closer. There's no reason that he wouldn't be in the fight for the victory, and let's hope he is, and let's hope we see the top 3 in the championship really going bar to bar for it. But yeah, as you say, overcoming Pecco and Martin, they're good at Sachsenring as well, and the bike is good as well. So it's let's hope we see a real fight between these 3. And as we say, Marc needs it now. He's dropping out. The points that are dropping away, not helped by the tyre pressure penalty, of course, costing him some World Championship points. Let's hope those don't prove crucial at the end of the year, because that would also be controversial, couldn't it? But yeah, he wants to go into the summer break. He's been losing points, hasn't he? Take a big bite back, and they all do. They want to go into the summer break on a high, and this is a good chance. I think that Marc can afford to risk a bit more as well. I think with the 2 guys at the front so close, that maybe they'll be a little bit more careful. They won't want to throw it away, because they know that the title direction could take quite a big swing. If you're Martin, you could lose the lead. If you're Bagnaia, you could undo all of the hard work you've done. I think Marc's just got to go for it. As you say, this track, it's great for him. Last year, it obviously wasn't. Yeah. I think for me, one of the most, apart from Marc being slumped on the ground, obviously after the last of those accidents, the moment where he gave the bike the middle finger. I mean, wow. That was really in practice, wasn't it? After it tried to launch him, I think it was down the waterfall corner, wasn't it? Yeah. And that made you really think, he's not enjoying riding this bike, is he, around this track? And as we know, Marc has always said, look, there was no one single moment, but I think a lot of us believe that was certainly a big part of his decision to leave, wasn't it?
Yeah, because he even kind of referenced it at Assen. He said a year ago he considered maybe this is the end. And remember, last year it was Sachsenring and then Assen. So obviously it was a great shout, Pete. He gave pretty much indication that that's where he felt that this is where either he leaves Honda or he retires, and this is where it all started last year. But a year on, he's a factory Ducati rider heading into 2025. But Rob, this is a big weekend pressure-wise because, like I said, he's magic things. Like the last win he had around there in 2021, it wasn't really, he didn't start on pole position. It broke his streak of pole positions that he had at the Sachsenring, but he came from 5th and he won the race. It was a real emotional scene for him. A first win back after breaking his arm and stuff. But he has got a lot of, not a lot, he's got 3 24s maybe with Bastianini in there and Martin and Bagnaia to kind of just keep an eye on. But as Pete said, do you think he'll take more risk this weekend because he knows this is the track where I'm so good at and I've got the bike underneath me now? I can just afford to maybe pressurize them more into making mistakes.
I do. I think obviously for Marc Marquez, it's a case of this weekend has hurt a little bit in the championship. Ultimately, I still think he'll consider himself a championship contender, and I think he is. But I do think he has a little bit less pressure from that perspective. The fact that Bagnaia and Martin are so close now could, like Pete said, they could sort of have eyes on each other a little bit and just want to make sure, in Bagnaia's case especially, you wouldn't want to win 5 of the last 6 races and the last 5 in a row, have a crash in the Grand Prix, Martin win and then undo all that work, and then you're back up to maybe 40 points behind. Yep. So for Bagnaia, it's almost a case of we expect him to be in the top 3, but he'll need to finish because Martin will be strong and a retirement would be a big point swing. For Marc, though, there's going to be a lot of pressure. And I don't mean that just from the perspective of he'll want to win at Sachsenring. I think what is troubling for Marquez and adds more pressure is that we expected him to win already on a Ducati and he hasn't. I think that's the big thing, is he hasn't won when we maybe expected it already. I think Jerez was a very good chance for him to win. He obviously just lost out to Bagnaia in the Grand Prix and crashed in the sprint when he was leading that race. Marc is probably more than any other rider, he likes to send a message to other riders, and he won't want Bagnaia and Martin getting comfortable thinking they've got Marc covered. So for him, addressing that is going to be a big need in his mind, and he won't want to be beaten by probably the 2 riders he considers his biggest challengers at his circuit, quote unquote his circuit. So for Marc, I think he'll be more relaxed in a sense of he can take more risk because of the points standings, but there's, I think, so much pressure still on his shoulders to win because of those factors. Yeah,
it's a good point because I think Bagnaia has kind of had these banker circuits. He knows Mugello, he's going to win at it, he's delivered. He knows Assen, he's going to do it. And I think now it's switched where he knows Marc Marquez now in his head, this is it. Now I should have won a race maybe beforehand, but I want to win this one. And if he wins both races, I think it'll be a perfect weekend for him. And it also sends a message, like you say, Rob, to the other 2 riders, Martin and Bagnaia. You haven't got me covered off just yet. So just always that little thought in the back of their head that I'm still here. He's 58 points, I think, behind. It's a big gap, because Bagnaia's only 10 off Martin, and it's kind of going the way it was maybe in last year, maybe, with Bezzecchi was always kind of in the distance, not third, but he was close, but never got there. But Marquez will need to turn it around fast because, like you say, summer break's coming up, and momentum is like a big thing. If you win the last race before the summer break, it carries into the summer, and when you get to the next track, you're going to be right there. Excited to see how it goes, Pete. I just think that the form Bagnaia's in, he's tried to play it down yesterday, saying that, Martin and Marquez will have something a bit extra. I don't believe that for 1 second. I think he's going to be right there, and he'll be right at the front in every session again, pretty much.
Yeah, that's right. We're coming from a great track for Pecco, Assen, obviously. Now we're on a track where Marquez has an incredible record. Martin won last year. So the emphasis is on those guys to respond to Pecco and put the pressure on him. But it's hard to believe that Pecco's not going to be up there this weekend, given the form he's in at the moment. So, let's hope that all these 3 things combine. And, looking further back, of course, last chance now for Acosta to beat Marquez's record as the youngest winner, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I think there's a sense that KTM would like to get that done, and I think that it would be great for MotoGP to have Marc Marquez versus Pedro Acosta, but I don't know. I think it's a Ducati circuit. Everything. Well, I say that now. Every circuit's a Ducati circuit, isn't it? They just don't have a weakness anymore, and I think it's a testament to what they've all done over the years. Because if you had said that Sachsenring and Ducati years ago, it wouldn't have even thought in your mind. It was always seen as a Honda track with Marquez, and yeah, let's see what Marquez can do. I think it's a big thing this weekend as well, Rob, for the adaptation, because he's always won on the Honda, and it just kind of felt that like he was always making that difference, and he could just do it because he loves left-handed corners so much. It suits his riding style. But let's see how he attacks Sachsenring with the Ducati, and especially with being the older Ducati having last year's data. But like, it'll be interesting to see how his riding style suits the Sachsenring on a different bike. That's a big thing for me as well.
Yeah, and I think for, like you said, to have so much success on the Honda when, especially at the tail end when he was winning at Sachsenring on the Honda, it wasn't the best bike. Because we saw different sort of challenges. I know Yamaha were really, really strong with Vinales at times. And there was that one race where I think it was Jonas Folger was pushing Marc Marquez really, really hard on the Monster Tech 3 Yamaha. So he's always had challenges and someone on a bike that has maybe been working better, but he's made that difference. And again, I think that's maybe another one of those added pressures where he hasn't won a race this year, but that's fine. If you just take it as Sachsenring is a standalone weekend, this is the best bike Marc has probably had, you could say, since probably 2019, for sure, but maybe even a little bit longer than that. So he has 2 bites at the cherry with the sprint as well. So if he came away without winning either of the 2 races on a bike that is the best bike he's had in years, I think that would be a big disappointment for Marc Marquez, because we know he's naturally going to be strong on any bike he jumps on if that bike is working, because of the left-handed nature of the circuit. It's just a circuit that suits him with the hard braking into turn 1, the hard braking down the waterfall sort of corner and back straight. So it's a circuit that is tailor-made for him just in general. Factor in that he's on a bike. Obviously the GP24 is stronger, but it's, I guess you could call it the second best bike, even though it's still a Ducati. So he's got everything he needs, I think, this weekend to go and win. And again, not to sort of ruin it for the listeners and viewers that Bagnaia and Martin are going to dominate the second half of the season, but this might be one of those very few chances Marc does now have of winning. Obviously, he is going to get that aero update that Pete mentioned, and maybe that could sort of, in the second half of the season, the GP23s could even get a little bit closer again. But if we're just looking at it right now, this might be one of his best and last sort of chances to at least do a Grand Prix win and maybe the double. So I think he's going to really, really want to be on top this weekend and again send a message to Bagnaia and Martin going into the summer break saying, I am still here and I can still win a race.
Yeah, making sure that he gets his banker tracks in and just wins at them. I've said it before. I think of here and I think of Aragon, really 2 circuits that he really loves. So that would be a chance for him to maybe get these wins that he needs just to try and get some momentum, because that's what you need in MotoGP. You can finish on the podium, but when Marc Marquez sees Jorge Martin and he sees Pecco Bagnaia winning, that's just going to fuel him even more, and he wants that feeling back. He hasn't had it in 3 years coming now. So yeah, a big weekend for Marc. But we'll touch on the predictions that we want to make for this race. It's going to be it'll be interesting to see what the weather does, Pete, isn't it? It's usually quite warm for the Sachsenring. You get, I think the last maybe the year before 22 was record temperatures. It was so hot. And how do you think that's going to play? Do you think it will make it easier to predict, or do you think it will be a bit more difficult?
I think this revised rear tyre as well changes things. We're hearing from guys, you mentioned people on the 23 bike and the data and things like that. The guys are saying, we can't just fit the same as last year because the tyre has changed things. Ralph Fernandez has also mentioned this. He's on the 23 Aprilia, of course. It's not just the guys on the Ducati. So it seems like it's new for everybody. Even if you're on a 23 bike and you've got the data from last year, you can't just fit that because the tyres have changed a bit. So, Sachsenring really hard on the tyres, isn't it? A lot of laps. It's just continually cornering and really compressed. It's amazing when you see it. You think to see that a Grand Prix track fits in such a small area. It's really up and down, of course, but really, really cramped area. One straight is almost back to back with another part of the track. and things like that. So yeah, it's almost like a claustrophobic feel, but fantastic atmosphere, for the spectators and everything else. It's normally a sold out event, isn't it? One of the biggest of the year. So it's there's always a great atmosphere there. The Germans love their motorbike racing, and I think Mark will obviously go in there as the favourite, and the big question is, will the guys be closer? We're speaking about, Vinales and how disappointed you guys were saying earlier, but then again, he was still the best of the non-Ducatis, wasn't he? And let's be honest, he was 8 seconds ahead of the bike that he's signed to ride next year, isn't he? Which was the KTM of Brad Binder in that race. So you can look at it either way, glass half full or glass half empty. Really, the only way if you want to guarantee to be fighting a Ducati next year is to be on a Ducati. And I'm saying that thinking about, as we were talking earlier, that the free seats at the satellite team that are still to be decided, and another fallout of the Pramac deal, of course, which is that there's going to be some factory bikes that are now available at the satellite teams, aren't there? So there's some really competitive rides that will also be going on this weekend. Last event before the summer break. This is the chance to get the deals done for next year for the next group of riders. And as we say, there's 2 factory Ducatis there now that are we don't exactly know which team will have them. Will they both be at VR46? One at Grassini, one at VR46? We don't know, but either way, competitive rides still to be taken.
Yeah. Competitive. There's not a bad ride in MotoGP anymore. That's the thing. It's not like years ago where you would just have to settle for maybe an older bike. Everything's so competitive, and the nature of this circuit, Rob, every bike it all just kind of blends, and the rider can make a difference. And this is why it just springs to mind predictions. Is Marc Marquez just going to do the double and it's just going to be as simple as that, or can you think that Jorge Martin, who done the double here last year, can he just say, listen, no, this is my track now? And that would be a really good battle between, I'd say, those 3. That would be something pretty special, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, not to spoil my prediction, which I guess we'll get onto in a minute, but I think having those 3 racing, we've not really seen all 3 go head-to-head in a race together. There's always, even if it's Bagnaia and Martin, we've always seen them have a little gap between each other and not really go head-to-head. I know those 2 did go head-to-head at this Sachsenring last season, so it's already given us that sort of prior experience that we know that the nature of the circuit, it is a rider's circuit, but it's, to your point, Jordan, it's a circuit where, because it's so short, the lap times are going to be really condensed and really, really tight. And then given the amount of Ducatis and competitive Ducatis at the minute, and then factor in KTM should be stronger, Aprilia should be strong. So they could be big groups, big battles. I think at the front of the field, especially in the sprint, I don't think a Martin or a Marc or Bagnaia will have the chance to really pull away. So I think we're naturally, because of the circuit and the competitiveness, we're going to get a close race, at least in one of the 2, if not both. So I think we're in store for, Assen was a good weekend. Bagnaia sort of ruined it by being so dominant, but I don't think we're going to have as dominant a performance from anyone this weekend, which should open it up to a very, very strong competitive race.
Yeah. So, Pete, give me your predictions for the sprint. That'll be an easy one to predict, I imagine.
Well, I'll go with Mark for the sprint. I think if he can, certainly qualifying, of course, will be key for the reasons you guys have mentioned, with the lap time so close. One small mistake in qualifying, you could be several rows back. But assuming that there's no big shock in qualifying, should we say? Yeah, I'll say that Mark's just going to go all out, and he's got, he can take bigger risks than the others, especially in the sprint. Not worry about the tyres too much, and just go for it. So yeah, I'll go with Mark for the sprint.
Yeah, Rob, give us your prediction for the sprint. Is it the same? Is it?
It is the same, but I think Mark is going to very, very narrowly beat Martin to the win.
Yeah.
Potentially a last lap battle.
All right, my prediction for the sprint, I think it's going to be Jorge Martin's going to win it. I think it'll be really close, like you say, Rob. It's a toss of a coin if it's either or of those battles. I think qualifying is going to be so crucial, and I think I can just see it now. It's going to be Martin, Bagnaia, Marquez on the front row, and I'm like, well, this race is going to be brilliant, and I think Martin will win the sprint. And I think now for my prediction going for Sunday, I'll put my Sunday prediction first. I do think Marc Marquez going the Grand Prix. I just think, yeah, he'll know. And say if Martin beats him in a sprint, it'll fire him up even more, and he'll just want to then go all in, as he says, Pete. And I think that'll be it. But it could be the opposite. Say Marquez beats Martin in the sprint, Martin might get fired up then and want to beat him in the Grand Prix. So we're in for a great weekend. And Pete, what's your prediction for the Grand Prix? Is it a Marquez double?
No, I'm going Martin.
So you're doing the opposite to me.
Yeah, so I'm going. Yeah, I think that, as you say, I think that he'll be fired up to win the Grand Prix. And yeah, I don't know. I think Martin. I was impressed by how he handled the pressure at Assen of not quite having the speed for Pecco, but still hanging in there. And I just think, as you say, this track suits him better, and I think he'll make the most of it. So yeah, as you say. But I mean, the dream scenario is those three guys fighting, isn't it? Down to the last corner. Let's keep our fingers crossed for that.
Rob, give us your prediction for the Grand Prix.
I'm going to go in a different direction to both of you, and I'm going to go with the Marquez double. I think he'll win the Grand Prix as well.
Yeah. See, and Bagnaia's probably going to win both races now. That's it. We've just given Martin and Marquez the absolute limelight, and this is what Bagnaia wants. No one talking about him, so he can just slip on through and win. And that's what a big factor, actually. I will say that. You could ask that question yesterday in the press conference. Did it help that everything had been about Martin and Marquez prior to Assen? And he kind of said, it's good when no one speaks about you because you can just do whatever you want. So yeah, that'll be it. Now, our predictions were pretty accurate for Assen. I think you both got the Grand Prix right, but I don't think... Yeah, you did. I think I got the sprint right, and I think you got the Grand Prix right, so...
Yeah, I think I went Martin for the sprint and Bagnaia Grand Prix.
You said Vinales, so you did.
Oh yeah, I did. Vinales, that was it. Vinales for the sprint, Bagnaia for the Grand Prix. You're right.
We don't really. Our predictions never really mean anything anyway to anyone, so it doesn't matter. It'll probably be so different. So yeah.
Well, if I can't get Marc Marquez winning both races at Sachsenring, I don't think we're going to get a double prediction right.
It would just be MotoGP in 2024. You think everything's easy to predict, but then it just changes. But that's it for the Sachsenring preview. We'll have a review next week. The last thing I want to talk about, Pete, just briefly, I just want to mention there was an article about Kazakhstan by Motorsport and Autosport yesterday saying that it's going to be swapped out and it'll be replaced by Qatar. Now, there's been no official confirmation of that, but the calendar takes another change, and that's, I don't know where I stand on it this year. Where do you take things for granted, or is this really going to happen? But it looks like Kazakhstan isn't going to happen, is it?
That's what it sounds like, doesn't it? Which would be the third event of the year, wouldn't it? Argentina gone, India gone, and now Kazakhstan gone. And we wait to see... If it's official, we wait to see what it's replaced by. It does sound like there will be a replacement. It won't just be removed and they'll carry on, if you like, with the gap. It will be replaced. Talk of Qatar, but then that's certainly not confirmed yet. There's also talk that maybe a European circuit might step in and have another race. So we'll be back to the two races in 1 year of the COVID years, perhaps times, potentially. Another upset, isn't it? Let's wait and see. I mean, what does it mean overall? I guess if you're someone like Pedro Acosta, a rookie, you'd have liked the chance to go to a brand new track, wouldn't you? And just see what
level
you can
playing
do.
Field, isn't it?
Yeah. Like Marco Bezzecchi last year at India, wasn't it? And that was something that was brought up by Aprilia when they signed him, that, seeing how when everything was level, when no one had any experience of a track, and how he dominated that race, that was a big part in them signing him. So, we won't get that chance now with Acosta. It would have been earlier in the year, wouldn't it? It would have, it would have been another race where he could potentially have beaten Marquez's win record if he had won there. But first of all, it's been postponed, and now it sounds like it'll be gone altogether. And then this will be the second time, won't it, that it's been cancelled if that's the case. I think it was last year; it was on the calendar as well. So, let's see what the future of that event is. But certainly doesn't look good.
It doesn't look good, and as the time of recording, like I say, nothing official, but probably when I'm editing the video, there'll be a drop of news that'll say it's been replaced. So. Just from what Autosport were reporting, just to clarify, they were saying that it'll be off the calendar and it will be replaced by a second race in Qatar in September. So that'll be fun. And who knows what happens with Qatar in September, because it's very hot there in the summer. And I think of the F1 race last year in October. I mean, it was physically, even during the night for the drivers, it was like the most physical they'd had in terms of heat exhaustion. They were dehydrated. So who knows what happens there. Yeah, anything you want to add, Rob, to that situation that we have with Kazakhstan?
Just that it's a disappointment that, another brand new circuit is coming onto the MotoGP calendar and then having such issues with going ahead. Obviously, Finland was one that never really got going, never got kick-started. And, there was talk of India last season. Thankfully, that one went ahead and it was a great weekend, which was great to see. But sad that it's been postponed firstly and then cancelled altogether, because like Pete said, it would have been a great opportunity, not just for someone like Acosta, but just for all the riders in general, and for us watching, to have a brand new circuit, no data, and see who could come out on top and what the racing would be like. So disappointing that Kazakhstan's not going ahead. Obviously Qatar is the one that's being talked about at the moment. You guys both said the heat at that time of year. It's personally, I see it as quite difficult for that one to go ahead. I think something you mentioned off air, John, something in Portimao maybe, or another race at Aragon would be a bit more feasible. Yeah. But we'll see what gets confirmed. I think something this week will definitely be announced.
Yeah, just I don't know what to say. Honestly, it's like the calendar's changed so much, and yeah, we'll see if anything comes out. If you get my vote, though, bring back Brno. That's what I say. I love Brno. It was a great track, even though I know they have issues with finance and stuff, and the track surface was always a problem. But yeah, great track, so it was. That would be my replacement track, but I don't run MotoGP. I'm not the FIA. I'm not Dorna, so I can't make any decisions. But yeah, that's it for this week. We'll be back next week for a review of the Sachsenring, and who knows, we could be talking next week about Marc Marquez winning his first race on a Ducati, or Jorge Martin extending the championship lead. Who knows? Pecco Bagnaia could even continue his winning streak. But if you enjoyed the podcast, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like the video. If you're listening, make sure to follow us on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave us a review. It helps out massively. And yeah, we'll see you next time.